everybody, this is chapter 9, section 5. This is called completing the square. This is a type of, or a concept that allows us to factor things when I can't X factor it. For this particular chapter or section, we need to really understand what perfect squares are. And I know that we've talked about it, but today we've really got to have a pretty be very aware of those kinds of numbers. Okay, so what I'm talking about is numbers like 16, 25, 36, 49, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so remember, these are perfect squares. That means if I took the square root of it, I get a number that when I multiply it to itself gives me, in this case, 16. So that would be 4. Okay, so 4 times 4 gives me 16. And if I took the square root of 25, it would be 5 times 5, and so on. Okay? So those are numbers that we've talked about. Kind of introduce them to you. We need to understand what they mean, what they are, and what their square roots are. That's a big concept for us. All right, so in this case, what I want you to try to be able to do then, so if I gave you this quadratic equation, you want to be able to factor it, but I want you to think a different way instead of trying to X factor it. Is 16 a perfect square? Yes, it is. You just did it. The square root of it is 4. So 4 times 4 gave me 16. And what I want to do is then be able to add those together, kind of like in X factoring, add those factors together. Do they give me the middle number? And they do. So therefore, I can factor that into x plus 4 times x plus 4. The factors are both the same. And we've done this before. What that does then is allows me to rewrite that as x plus 4 squared. So we have to be able to do that today. Okay? So if I look at the second one, what they're asking me to try to do is find this last number. So I look at the second number, or the middle term. What number added to itself gives me 10? Well, it's 5 plus 5. So what's 5 times 5? And it gives me 25. And since both of these factors are the same, it's going to allow me then to write x plus 5 squared. Okay? In the next example, 7 times 7 gave me that 49 that's at the end. But what's 7 plus 7? Does it give me the middle number? And it does, 14. Okay. Once again, because I have the same factors, I'm able to go ahead and write that as x plus 7 squared. Okay. So hopefully you know, that kind of is understandable. Seeing what we're doing, I didn't have to X factor it. I used square roots to be able to do that. But I was using the concepts of X factoring. What multiplies to the top of the X, what adds to the bottom of the X. Now that's giving me these numbers that we're working with, okay? And therefore it gives me factors that are the same, which then lets me rewrite it as a squared term or a perfect square. Okay? This last one's a little bit tougher. They don't give me a whole lot of information, but I think if we use what we did in the previous questions, we'll take what we got. The only thing they're giving me is this 12 in the middle. But remember, these other ones were what's the same number that adds to the middle term or the middle coefficient. In this case, I think it's 6 plus 6 gives me 12. So therefore, 6 times 6, I think, gives me 36. Sorry. It does. So therefore, I think I can put the 6's in the boxes, and I can. Okay. So once again, I have the same factors, and therefore I can rewrite it as a perfect square. Okay. So we got to be able to do that today. Hopefully that helped a little bit. You've done it before, but not really for what we're doing today. So we got to make sure we have that down and understand. Okay, here's the notes for the real notes, that was kind of a review for 9-5 completing the square. Once again, I do tend to go a little bit quick on notes, but today I'm going to try to go slower. So if you get bogged down, hit pause, get caught up with your notes. This might be even a day that you rewind it a couple times and listen to it again or watch it again, because it's tough. And if you get really stuck, then make sure you're getting a hold of it, okay? So for completing the square, we're going to solve by creating a perfect square. And this is a concept for problems that won't factor. You can still do this process even with problems that do X factor, but you know, I'd rather X factor. It's much easier than what we're going to do today. Okay. Just a really kind of quick side note here on these. X plus 4 squared really means I can rewrite it as x plus 4 times x plus 4. I could FOIL that out. I would get x. I should get x plus 4 plus 8x plus 16. This next one is kind of similar to what we were just doing on the previous page. Is 9 a perfect square? Yes, it is. 3 times 3 gives me 9. But does 3 plus 3 give me the middle number? And it does. It gives me 6. So that means I could factor that to this. Okay, which means I can rewrite it as x plus 3 squared. Okay, so it's just another one that we did previously. Sometimes, though, even though this is a perfect square, and I take what the two factors are, I try to add them together, I might not get this guy. You know, 9 times 1 gives me 10. This could be a 10 right here. So it's not always going to work. You have to kind of think it out. But today, this is kind of what we're going to try to do. Is it perfect? And what are the factors for it? Do they add up to the middle one? Okay. All right. You don't have to write this down. Just kind of watch. I'm going to try to factor this. So I'm going to take that. And I'm going to go. Hold on a second. Let me get this a little bit more centered for everybody. Try to X factor this. There's 1 here. 1 times negative 9 is that. The middle term is 4. If the negative number, or if the number on top is negative, then those signs need to be different. What multiplies to negative 9 but adds up to positive 4? You're racking your brain, and nothing does. There's only a couple ways to get a 9, and neither one of them work. So I can't factor this with X factoring. So I'm going to have to complete the square. Okay? So we're going to get through this process together. Please listen. Please take really good notes. Back it up if you need to. And just, you know, if you're really, really stuck, make sure you get a hold of me. Before we get started, just to help you with understanding a couple things. All quadratic equations have to be in standard form. In this case, it has to equal 0. Sometimes standard form it equals y, but for what we're doing, it has to equal 0. So that's the first thing we've got to know. A couple things you're going to have to know what a constant is. The constant is just the number on the end that does not have a variable. Okay. The other thing you're going to need to know is b. B is the value of the coefficient in front of the middle number. So those two things are pretty critical to what we're going to do. So just ahead of time, you're going to get these terms. You need to understand where they're coming from. Okay. All right, here we go. So we're going to start with step 1. We're going to move the constant to the other side and leave a space. So I'm going to move this over a little bit. Go here so everybody can see it. So this is kind of, when I first do these with kids, they don't understand. I gotta move it to the other side. And then this other part about leaving a space, we've never done that before. But they get really caught up in, what do you mean move it to the other side? Well, get it to the other side. We've been doing this all year. I have to add 9 to both sides, okay? So therefore, and then they tell me to leave a space. I'm leaving a space where that negative 9 was. So I'm just going to do that and leave a space. that's step one. You got to be able to get there. Pretty easy. Step two, and this is the most critical step. If I don't do this one right, the rest of the problem's messed up. I'm going to spend a lot of time on it, but I messed it up at the beginning. It's not going to make me very happy. I'm going to divide b by 2. Now remember, b is that middle term value, so the middle term value is 4. I'm going to divide it by 2, and when 4 divided by 2 gives me 2, write it down. The second part of that step is to square it, which means go like that, square it. Not square root it, square it. 2 squared is 4, okay? So again, it's really important you write this stuff down. Don't do this in your head. You're going to just get lost and have a headache, okay? Add, step 3, add this number to both sides. So that space that I created right here, I'm going to put that 4 in that I got, but then I have to add it to this side, okay? So let's rewrite this so it's all cleaned up. I'm going to have what I started with, x squared. I'm going to keep that 4x. I'm not changing because I divided it. I just used it to help me complete the square. I'm now going to take this 4 and plug it into this spot. So plus 4. Okay, equals, and now 9 plus 4 is 13. Okay? So that's step 3. Big step. A lot of things going on in step 2 and 3. You got to make sure we can get through that pretty easy, because the rest of it, or not easy, but accurately, because the rest of the steps are kind of hopefully straightforward. All right. Step 4 says factor the left side into a perfect square. Now let's go back to the little review that we did. Is 4 perfect? Yes, it is. It's 2 times 2. And 2 plus 2 gives me the middle number. So now I can factor it into x plus 2 times x plus 2. And I have this 13 on the other side. So that's step 4. Okay. So we used the little review that we had before. Okay. So I'm just gonna pause here for a second, kind of explain a couple things that might help you too. This plus number or plus symbol I get here, I'm getting from the original problem of that, whatever this symbol was, because sometimes it's going to be negative. That's the symbol I'm going to use in my factors. Okay. So that's one key to kind of help you to check, am I doing this right? The other one is when I divided the middle term by 2, whatever the answer I get, in this case it was a 2, whatever answer I get right there is going to be my factors right here. Where those two numbers are going to be the same in both. So that's another way to kind of check, hey, did I get this right? And when we have more time, I kind of teach it this way. Take that number instead of factoring it. But we used what we kind of reviewed with today. All right. Now that was step 4, but that's the first part of the step. We factor the left side, but write it as a perfect square, which means since it's the same thing, I can rewrite it as that. Okay. And then step 5, the end. Square root both sides. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And remember, when you take the square root of a number, we're going to put that plus minus sign. We talked about that earlier in this chapter. Okay. When I take the square root of the left-hand side, all it does is give me what was in this case, the parentheses and the square root. The square goes away because it's canceled by, there's a little 2 right there we never see, but they cancel out, leaves me with what's inside. Equals plus or minus square root of 13. Okay? That was the first part of step 5. The second part says, and then solve it for x. That means get x by itself. So what we've been doing all year is I'm going to, in this case, subtract 2, and I'm going to get, now you got to consider the square root as like a variable. I can't add or subtract things to it because they're not the same. So I have to write kind of a funny answer, funny looking answer. I get that. Okay. So that's completing the square. It takes up a lot of room on your paper. You got to be neat. Lots of steps. Some of the steps have 2 steps in it. It's just a process that you gotta get down. The only way you get good at it is by doing it. You make mistakes, you make mistakes. We'll fix it together, but you gotta try. If you go, there's too much going on, you've already beat yourself up. You're not gonna be successful. So give it a shot. Make mistakes, fix them, understand the process. Keep the notes in front of you, and kind of follow them. This is a really good example, so it should help you. Okay. All right. Let's practice it then. So we're going to go ahead, just really quick, some little extra practice. We're going to try to find out what number goes in C. So we're going to go back to the middle number. What number added to itself gives me 20? So hopefully you came up with 10. But now I have to go 10 times 10, or 10 squared, and C should be 100. Okay, hopefully you understood that. This problem we just kind of did, what number added to itself gives me 4? I think it's 2 plus 2. So if I multiply it, I'm going to get 2 times 2, or 2 squared. So that should be 4. Okay. This one's a little different. What number adds to itself gives me a negative 12. So just think of what negative number added to itself gives me negative 12. Hopefully you said negative 6 plus negative 6. But negative 6 times negative 6, or negative 6 squared, gives me 36. Okay, so a little practice here on that. Okay, enough practicing. Let's get after this stuff. So here's our first example doing this together. We've got to go through our steps. So I have my notes out, but just kind of follow me along. First step is to get the constant to the other side. My constant 16. To move it, I got to subtract it. Okay. Rewriting it, I'm going to leave a space where it was. And I got negative 16 over here. Okay. All right. Second step, critical step, you take the middle term and you're going to divide it by 2. And that's going to give me negative 7. Okay. The next part of that step is to square the answer, whatever it might have been. Okay, so negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive 49. Okay. And this part right here, I'm just using the middle term to get me some help to complete the square. So I'm not changing anything in the equation that I already got there. I'm just using it. Okay. The next step says to add it to both sides. So remember, that number is going to go in the space that I created, but add it to the other side. So a lot of kids get caught up in just doing it here, and they forget to go over here. So make sure you remember both sides. Let's clean this up a little bit. I'm going to rewrite it with x squared minus 14x plus 49. And over here on this side, I'm going to add those together, and I get 33. Okay. All right. I'm going to factor this now. So once again, looking at this last number, is it a perfect square? Yes, it is. Well, 7 times 7 is 49. 7 plus 7 gives me 14. And I know it's negative. So remember, that sign right here is going to be the sign I use in my factors. And my factors are going to be exactly the same. And remember that 7, or negative 7 that I got it back here, not way back here, but right there, and I'm using it again. So hopefully that might help you a little bit, take some of the thought process out of doing this. I am going to write this, the next step, or part of the third step is to, the fourth step, I'm sorry, is to perfect square it. And I get that. I'm going to be able to now take the square root of both sides. This is step 5. First part of step 5. It's plus or minus the square root of this number. When I take the square root left-hand side, it just leaves me with what's inside of it. And then I'm solving it for x, which means in this case I have to add 7 to both sides, but I can't add 7 to the square root of 33. I just have to write that. Oops. Hold on a second. Let me fix this. Got ahead of myself. Okay. Let me make that neater. Okay. There you go. Took up a lot of room. Lots of steps, lots of things to remember. But practice, practice, practice makes us better. Okay. This next one over here, one of the keys of us factoring is always looking for a perfect square. Sometimes I don't say that first. Anything I factor, I should always say, is there a perfect square I could take out? And then say that in any of these that I've done so far. In this one, is there a perfect or not a perfect square, a GCF that I could take out? I can divide this by 2. Okay. So when I divide it by 2, I get this. And 0 divided by 2 is 0. Okay. This one's going to come out a little bit differently for us. So we're just going to use it as practice. But when we get to the end, I'll explain, what was a little bit different. So first step is to move the constant to the other side. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave a space where the -5 was. And we're there. Okay. So critical step. Gotta make sure we do this correctly. The middle term, we're dividing it by 2. We get an answer. In this case, it's -2. And square it. Okay. And -2 squared gives me a +4. Always gonna, whatever we do here, I'm always gonna get a positive answer. Okay. Next step is to add it to both sides. So I'm going to kind of clean this up and do it down here. I'm going to add the 4 in the space and add the 4 to the other side. So 5 plus 4 is 9. Okay. I'm going to step 4, I'm going to factor the left-hand side. So remember, is this a perfect square? Yes, it is. 2 times 2. I'm going to go ahead and write the same factor. So x and x, and if this is the square root of 4 is 2, that's going to be my factors. But remember, I got a -2 back here, and the sign originally was negative, so they're going to have negative signs here. Okay. Equals 9. Okay, so really important we get through to this step. I can read the second part of step 4 is make it a perfect square. So there you go. Step 5 is to take the square root of both sides. And that just leaves me what's inside. So it's kind of a formality step, but this is kind of critical. What is a square root of 9? Is it perfect? It is. It's 3. Okay. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second again. A lot of kids, when they take the square root of 9, in this case, and they get 3, they leave it as the square root of 3. This symbol is telling me to do something. When I do it, when I actually do it and I get an answer, okay, I get a real number, okay? The square root symbol goes away because I did what it told me to do. So once I do that, it goes away. So now I'm going to, the second part of step 5 is to go ahead and solve for x. So in this case, I'm going to add 2. Well, this is going to be the tricky part here. I got an actual number here with that 3. It's no longer a square root number. So I get 2 answers. I'm going to get 2 plus 3. And I'm going to get 2 minus 3. So that's where that plus minus sign kind of comes in. So 2 plus 3 is 5. and 2 minus 3 is negative 1. Okay? All right. This is different now. What we got here was different than we did before. Most of the time, we're going to get some kind of square root number as part of my answer. In this case, I got real numbers, okay? And that's because I could have X factored this at the very beginning. My original problem was this, okay? So if I do my, fill it in, I get this, I get this. These would both have to be, I'm sorry, wait a second, I think I messed that up. Minus, sorry. Hold on. So these are going to be different. I could have got this as my 2 factors, okay? So therefore, if I write my factors out to solve it, I'm going to get this, and I'm going to get this. And if I solve it, I get this, and I get this. So those were the 2 answers I got up here. Okay. So you need to ask yourself, is it easier to X factor it, or is it easier to complete the square? I think you're going to probably say this is the easiest way to do this. We just wanted to practice it with that, but then we wanted to show you what happens when you plus or minus things together, okay? All right, so there you go. So completing the squares, long process, takes up a lot of room, lots of things to remember. You've got to do a few of these. So make sure you do your classwork. Make sure you really ask questions. Use your notes. Make sure you're doing things well.